Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time we'll do a few Andor questions, and we will kick it off with this one from SuperGoose42, who asked, "Hey Thor, do you think if Syril hadn't run into Andor during the Gorman massacre, he would have survived and continued on his redemption arc? Do you think there might have been a future for him in the rebellion? I'm a long-time listener, but this is my first time asking a question here. Thank you for your time." And thank you for your question, because it is a good one, and I do think that yes, he was on the road to redemption. I don't think he was by any means there just because he was starting to piece it together, which is what I think is happening there. When we see him in the plaza, he's looking around, he's understanding that, oh my goodness, this is my fault. Not entirely, mind you, but I played my part. I played my role in this, even if I didn't necessarily understand entirely what I was doing, because he was tricked. He was lied to. He thought he was there to bring in outside instigators to help the Empire, to stop the rebellion. He didn't know he was there to fire up a rebellion so that they could be crushed and take the planet for resources and all that. But he did still play a part, and you can see it on his face. It is a very tragic scene when he is looking around and realizing again that, yeah, I kind of helped do all this. This is my fault. Though the truly tragic part is, he ends up seeing Cassian in that moment. And I think if Cassian isn't there, or if he never sees him, well, maybe Syril dies somewhere along the way. That's very likely. But if he doesn't see Cassian, if he doesn't have this moment of like, there is the guy who set me down this path. This is the guy who is responsible for everything that has happened to me. He is the guy that I can now place blame upon, even though I was just realizing that a lot of this was my fault too. Here I can focus my rage on this guy. I can kill the guy who was responsible for me falling for this trap or this trick and working for the Empire and helping them take over this planet, essentially. And it's tragic because even if you don't agree with Syril and everything he has done, you can kind of relate to the guy, right? A lot of us can relate to somebody who just wants to find a place to belong, who wants to find a purpose, who maybe has kind of felt directionless in life. And then somebody or something comes along, the Empire and Dedra in this case. They come along and they change your life and they give you meaning and purpose, and you're all in. You're in love. You want to believe in this and that you have now found everything you've ever wanted in life. You found meaning, and then it all comes crashing down, and you don't want to believe you were stupid enough to believe it in the first place. And there's Cassian. There's the guy you can again blame and attack and try to kill. And yeah, maybe if Cassian isn't there, he eventually just kind of calms down, he gets out of there alive and finds his way to the rebellion, or maybe he just never really does anything ever again. He becomes a depressed mess somewhere in a dark corner of the galaxy. But I did like the character. I do like to believe that he would have joined the rebellion and tried to redeem himself. Alright, and moving on, our next question comes to us from Golden Valley Pictures, who asked, "Hey Thor, would you be up for Rogue 2? Wilman, Clea, and Vel team up with Bothan spies to get the second Death Star plans." I am all in on that. It sounds fantastic. I would love to see something, some sort of follow-up to Andor and Rogue One, a kind of third act of this story, even though, yeah, kind of A New Hope is the third act of the story, you could certainly argue. But this was so good, this is so great, that there is certainly a part of me that just wants the story of some of these characters to go on, to see what they do next, to see what happens to them, to have another show in the same vein as Andor that does tackle the stealing of the second Death Star plans. Yet, at the same time, as I've said before, if we don't ever get anything from these characters ever again, which I think is unlikely because they just can't leave characters alone in this franchise, I think we certainly get a comic or some books or something about these characters somewhere again. And I mean in the future, because there are some books already coming out about the past or between the prequels and Andor that kind of try to connect those. We had the book of Mask of Fear, and there's more coming in that little trilogy. But there is again another part of me that says we don't ever need to know more about these characters. We can just let our imagination fill in the blanks. We can let our imagination decide if they died in the next battle, if they died before the rebels ever got to Hoth, or maybe they go on and they live through it all. And afterwards, after the rebellion wins, they have a nice, long, happy little life and, you know, live happily ever after. But if I had to pick between the two, I would certainly take Rogue 2 or whatever they would want to call it. I would take a story about the stealing of the second plans to the Death Star and, yeah, include some of the characters from Andor. That would be awesome. Alright, our next question then comes to us from Doug Lab, who asked, "Hey Thor, why do you think they didn't give the Force Healer a name? As far as I'm aware, we are just calling her the Force Healer." And I think that is mainly because they wanted the whole scene to be very ambiguous and open to interpretation. As I kind of discussed in yesterday's video, you could see it in a few different ways. You could interpret his place that the Force Healer is talking about as being this grand destiny to find the plans to the Death Star and to be a part of helping the rebellion liberate the galaxy and stopping the Empire. Or you could actually see that as a detour from his destiny that he was kind of forced to take from the one he was meant to be with, that being, of course, Bix. That his place and purpose in the galaxy all along, and he seemed to want to be there, was just at Bix's side, to live a nice, happy life with her somewhere. And there was actually another question or comment, and I'll get to his actual question, but he made a whole post about what his thoughts on that whole scene were and how it was about faith and belief. And it's a great comment. I'll put it on the screen should you want to read it. But that's what I think. I think it's mainly not named, or she's not named, because we just kind of want to leave this whole scene vague and open to interpretation. It does kind of give the Force very much that mysterious vibe where you're left wondering, is she a real Force healer? Is she actually a con artist, which Cassian suspects or figures she has to be? Is she actually seeing a destiny here, or did she just see that Cassian was being reluctant, kind of saw him out of the corner of her eye and called out to him, and had heard he had been shot in the shoulder before and knew he had a lingering pain? He had heard somebody in the camp talking about it, and she saw an easy mark, and that's why she initiated the contact and was trying to swindle them somehow, though I don't think she was asking for any money or anything, so I don't know how she was doing that or why she would be doing that necessarily. But you see my point. Hopefully the whole thing is left open to interpretation, whether this is actually something real that is happening, something that the Force is actually playing a part in, that the Force is guiding her, and that the Force is guiding Cassian, or if it's something else entirely, and again, if it is the Force kind of guiding her or guiding the Force healer to Cassian to tell him or tell Bix these things, what is actually his destiny? To destroy the Death Star or to be with the woman he loves? It's a great scene, it works very well, and again, I don't think you need to name the character and potentially open her up to being in future stories, though, of course, not naming her won't stop a comic book from including her someday or something. Alright, and now back to that comment or question from Aiden ALW, where they asked at the end of it, could you imagine other Star Wars live action projects in the future taking the route of Andor and not having Force users, lightsabers, etc., and have it about very regular people as opposed to superpowered, and not see any magic at all, or keep it ambiguous enough to allow for an interpretation absent the Force? And I mean, I certainly think so. If you go back to what Lucas originally intended with Star Wars, it was to bring back spirituality without necessarily promoting any one religion or belief. As I've said before, as much as I love knowing everything about the Force, how it works, and discussing it and all of that, I do think there was something special about the Force in the original trilogy where it felt very vague and mysterious. It is a very soft magic system at that point in time, and it still kind of is, but it does feel a lot more defined as the years have gone by. The prequels, for better or worse, depending on your point of view, do begin to explain it a bit more with the midichlorians. Now, midichlorians aren't the Force or anything like that. They just kind of allow people to hear the will of the Force. But certainly the fact that you can count them, you can kind of quantify them, you can kind of quantify the Force, or so the Jedi seem to think, because they would count them to see Force potential. But those sort of things, for some people, they really don't like it. They really just want it to be this vague and mysterious thing. So I do think a series, or even a movie, or whatever it might be, that does include more normal people or average non-Force users like Andor basically did, where the Force is included as a very ambiguous spiritual thing that no one is necessarily using, but can certainly reference and believe in or not believe in. Now, I think that is certainly an interesting route to go in the future because, well, even if the people in the story don't believe it or can't use it, we already know that it is there. It's not necessarily trying to say the Force isn't real, because again, you can't, it's already there. So yeah, I think that would be an interesting idea. I think they will try to do more like it. I do think they look at Andor and see that there is the potential for a lot of different things to be done with Star Wars, that you can go a more serious, a very, very serious tone with it, a more gritty, grounded approach that is not entirely absent the Force, but mostly absent the Force, and that it can work and that Star Wars fans, or at least some of them, will very much enjoy it. Alright, well that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think of anything and everything I had to say here, or how you would answer these questions, or ask a question for a future lightning response video. All you got to do, you start your comment off with "Hey Thor, ask a question." I try to answer it in a future video. But whatever the case may be, leave those comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.